The Gulf of Mexico, also referred to as the Gulf of America since January 2025, is an oceanic basin and a marginal sea of the Atlantic Ocean, mostly surrounded by the North American continent. It is bounded on the northeast, north, and northwest by the Gulf Coast of the United States, on the southwest and south by several Mexican states, and on the southeast by the island nation of Cuba. The coastal areas along the southern U.S. states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, which border the Gulf on the north, are occasionally referred to as the third coast of the United States, in addition to its Atlantic and Pacific coasts. But it's more often called the Gulf Coast. Moisture from the Gulf contributes to weather across the United States, including severe weather in Tornado Alley. The Gulf's traditional name is associated with the ethnonym Mexica, which refers to the pre-Columbian people of the Valley of Mexico, better known as the Aztecs. The Maya civilization used the Gulf as a major trade route. Mesoamerica represents a region of the New World like Mesopotamia does for the Old World. The Maya civilization was a Mesoamerican culture that developed in an area that includes southern Mexico. This region consists of the lowlands encompassing the Yucatan Peninsula along the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific coast and the Mexican state of Chiapas. The name Gulf of Mexico first appeared on a world map in 1550 and a written historical account in 1552. Spanish Europeans named the Gulf after Mexico because their mariners needed to cross the Gulf to reach Spain. Should this famous body of water now be called the Gulf of America? There's no formal protocol on the general naming of international waters, resulting in an ongoing naming dispute, which has both designations recognized by differing international organizations, entities, and governments. The Gulf took shape about 300 million years ago as a result of plate tectonics. Its basin is roughly oval and is over 900 miles wide, with an average depth of 5,300 feet. It's connected to part of the Atlantic Ocean through the Straits of Florida between the U.S. and Cuba, and with the Caribbean Sea via the Yucatan Channel between Mexico and Cuba. During the Spanish colonization of the Americas, the Spanish Main was the collective term for the parts of the Spanish Empire that were on the mainland of the Americas and had coastlines on the Caribbean Sea or Gulf of Mexico. The term was used to distinguish those regions from the numerous islands Spain controlled in the Caribbean, which were known as the Spanish West Indies. The Spanish Main included Spanish Florida and New Spain, the latter extending through modern-day Texas and Mexico, with a major port established along this stretch of coastline at the Spanish settlement of Veracruz. From the 16th to the early 19th century, enormous wealth was shipped from the Spanish Main to Spain, often through the Gulf, in the form of gold, silver, gemstones, spices, hardwoods, hides, and other valuable goods. Much of the wealth was silver in the form of pieces of 8. It was carried to the Spanish Main via the Pacific coast. Other goods originated in the Far East, having been carried to the Pacific coast of Spain's possessions on the Manila galleons from Southeast Asia, often through the Mexican port of Acapulco, and then transported overland to the Spanish Main for onward shipment across the Gulf to Europe. The Manila galleons were Spanish trading ships which for 250 years linked the Spanish Philippines with Mexico across the Pacific Ocean, making 1 or 2 round-trip voyages per year between the ports of Acapulco and Manila, which were both part of New Spain. The Manila galleons sailed the Pacific from 1565 to 1815, bringing to North America cargoes of luxury goods, such as spices and porcelain, in exchange for New World silver. The route also fostered exchanges that shaped the identities and culture of the countries involved. The Spanish Main became a frequent target for pirates, buccaneers, privateers, and nations at war with Spain, seeking to capture some of these riches. To protect this wealth, the Spanish treasure fleet was equipped with heavily armed galleons. The organization of the fleets in large convoys proved highly efficient, with only a few successful examples of major privateer attacks along the Spanish Main and on the Gulf waters. The Spanish West Indies were island colonies in the Caribbean that were part of the Spanish Empire and came under the jurisdiction of New Spain. The islands ruled by Spain were chiefly the Greater Antilles, such as Hispaniola, now modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. Spain also claimed the Lesser Antilles, such as Guadeloupe and the Cayman Islands. The islands that became the Spanish West Indies were the focus of the voyages of the Spanish expedition of Christopher Columbus in America. Largely due to the familiarity gained from Columbus's voyages, the islands were also the first lands to be permanently colonized by Spain in the Americas. The Spanish West Indies were also the most enduring part of Spain's American Empire, only being surrendered in 1898 at the end of the Spanish-American War. For over 3 centuries, Spain controlled a network of ports in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, including Havana, San Juan, and Veracruz, which were connected by galleon routes. The Caribbean islands of the Bahamas were once part of the Spanish West Indies. The Bahamian Islands are less than an hour away from mainland USA by air. Bimini is the closest island to the Florida coast. These islands are part of the Bahama Archipelago. An archipelago, by the way, is a group of many islands in a large body of water. The islands of the Bahamas comprise an archipelago extending for about 750 miles, or 1,200 kilometers, from Florida to Cuba. The Bahamas are a part of the West Indies and are considered Caribbean islands, but not part of the Antilles. I'm sure you've often heard and been confused by the terms West Indies, Caribbean, and Antilles. Well, let's try and clarify these words. West Indies consists of an archipelago separating the Caribbean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. Visited and called the Indies by Columbus, it was subsequently designated the West Indies to distinguish it from the East Indies archipelago in the South Pacific. The West Indies comprises 3 main island chains that extend in a roughly crescent shape from the eastern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and southeastern Florida in the United States to the northern coast of South America. The West Indies lies between the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of America, with a population of about 35 million. Antilles is a term applied to the whole of the West Indies, except the Bahamas. The Antilles separates the Caribbean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean and is divided into the Greater Antilles, which lie in the center to the north, and the Lesser Antilles to the southeast. The Caribbean Sea is about 1,500 miles long east and west, and between 490 miles wide. As is well known, the Caribbean Basin is noted for its mild tropical climate. Navigation is open and clear, making the Caribbean a major trade route for Latin and North American countries. The word Caribbean is derived from the word Carib, a tribe of Native Americans who inhabited the area when Spanish explorers arrived in the 15th century. The Carib people occupied various regions of the West Indies, Central and South America. The islands of the Bahamas, at the northernmost part of the West Indies where Columbus made his first landfall, comprise an archipelago of about 700 islands and islets, which are very small islands, and nearly 2,400 keys, which are small, low islands composed largely of coral or sand. The Bahamas lie proximate to the Gulf of America's eastern side and extend for about 750 miles, or 1,200 kilometers, from a point southeast of Palm Beach, Florida, to a point off the eastern tip of Cuba and west of the British dependency of the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Bahamas, officially known as the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, is an independent nation and a member of the British Commonwealth of Nations. Only about 40 of its 700 islands are inhabited. New Providence is economically the most important of the group, and Nassau, on New Providence Island, is the largest city of the country. Located on Grand Bahama Island, Freeport is the only other large town with a population of 27,000. The other chief islands, all of which are low-lying, include San Salvador or Watling and the Biminis, the westernmost of the group, situated only 60 miles east of Miami. The name Bahamas may derive from the Spanish for shallow sea, Bahia Mar, or the Lucayan word for Grand Bahama Island, Bahama, meaning large upper middle land. The Bahamas' first pre-Columbian inhabitants were the Taino Amerindians from both northwestern Hispaniola and northeastern Cuba. They moved into the southern Bahamas about the 7th century AD and became the Lucayans. They appear to have settled the entire archipelago by the 1100s. There may have been as many as 40,000 Lucayans living in the Bahamas when Columbus arrived. The Bahamian Lucayans were deported to Hispaniola as coerced workers, and within 2 decades, Taino societies ceased to exist as a separate population due to warfare, disease, forced labor, emigration, and outmarriage. After the Lucayans disappeared, the Bahamian islands were deserted until the arrival of the first permanent European inhabitants, Puritan settlers from the English colony of Bermuda, around 1649. Known as the Eleutherian adventurers, these people established settlements on the island now called Eleuthera, which in Greek means place of freedom. Long before the first Europeans arrived, there were some 500 nations already in North America. They blanketed the continent from coast to coast, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic. The Narvaez expedition was a Spanish journey of exploration and colonization started in 1527 that intended to establish colonial settlements and garrisons in Florida. The expedition was initially led by Spanish conquistador, soldier, and governor Panfilo de Narvaez, who died in 1528 when carried out to sea with some of his men on a raft, never to be seen again. Cabeza de Vaca was one of only 4 survivors out of 300 men. They were the first known non-Native Americans to see the Mississippi River and to cross the Gulf of Mexico and Texas. I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you'll join me next time.